Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Legion video. Today I'm going to be showing you the new Protection Paladin, and when I say new Protection Paladin, I do mean it. This is, in many regards, a new spec. It's quite different from the, Retribution, but with defensive capabilities that the Prot kind of ended up being. So in this video, I'll go through the basic abilities, then we'll go through all of the abilities, then we will go through the talents, and we will round it off with the artifact weapon, which is Truth Guard. As you can see, a very badass looking artifact weapon. So your main defensive cooldown, or just ability, or your active mitigation, is Shield of the Righteousness. 12-second recharge, 3 charges, you instantly slam the target with your shield. It needs to be used in melee range, by the way. That does 11,000 holy damage and reduces damage that you take by 25% for 4.5 seconds. Do note, that says reducing damage that you take, not physical damage. This will work on magical damage as well. So, in comparison to the live version, which I believe is only physical damage, you have more effectiveness. That's quite important. Now, Shield of the Righteousness also does play into some other mechanics due to readout. This causes your judgment crits to give you a charge of Shield of the Righteousness. So while you do have 3 charges, with the charge recharging every 12 seconds, you can get more via your crits of Judgment. Now we do also move on to Avenger Shield, which has a synergy with Shield of the Righteousness and Light the Protector, which I will cover after Avenger Shield. So, Avenger Shield looks like this. Very cool, nice sound effect. You throw your shield, it does 12,000 holy damage, interrupts or silences targets for 3 seconds, and then jumps to 2 additional nearby enemies. It also gives you a buff, which is the one I've just moused over, Avenger's Valor. If you look at the tooltip at the top right, increases the effectiveness of your next Shield of the Righteousness or Light the Protector by 20%. So, as an example, this is a base 25%, that will increase its power. Now let's have a look at Light of the Protector. This is interesting. Call down the light to heal yourself for 35% of your missing health. 20-second cooldown, so this is going to be used to regain health that you have lost throughout an encounter, and ideally, you want to, before you do a Shield of the Righteousness or a Light of the Protector, you want to do an Avenger Shield so that you can get more effectiveness out of the GCD and your charge that this takes up, because you're typically, other than the procs of Grand Crusader, you're only getting a charge every 12 seconds, so you want to make sure those charges are as good as they can be when you're using them. Now, of course, due to Shield of the Righteousness being a charge-based thing with 3 charges, if I think, oh shit, I'm going to be taking damage for, 12, like an extended period of 12 seconds, that's fine. You can just keep your uptime going on that. Now, if you look at Judgment itself, it says judge an enemy dealing 11,100 holy damage, 6-second cooldown, 30-yard range. It doesn't do anything else, though. It mainly is just a sort of a filler in your rotation that has some synergy with 1 or 2 talents, and then, of course, with Readout. Now, we also have Hammer of the Righteousness. This is pretty interesting. 1.5 second cooldown. You hit the target for, like, 2,000 damage, which isn't that much, but if you're standing in a consecration, it then causes a wave of light that hits all your targets within 8 yards for holy damage. So this is a merger of Crusader Strike and the traditional Hammer of the Righteousness. It's the two of them sort of melted into one button. So as you can see, this is now doing AoE damage, which is quite different. You've also just noticed that me using this is proc to free Avenger Shield. That is due to an effect called Grand Crusader. Whenever you avoid a melee attack, so that's not blocking, avoiding one, or use Hammer of the Righteous, you have a 15% chance of refreshing the cooldown on Avenger Shield. So the more procs of Grand Crusader you get, the more Avenger Shields that you can use, which means the more time you're going to be able to use or make use of Avenger's Valor whenever you use your Shield of the Righteousness or your Light of the Protector. So a major sort of skill influencing element of playing this is going to be ensuring that your Shield of the Righteousnesses or your Light of the Protectors are buffed up by the effect from your Avenger's Valor, though obviously there will be times when the RNG has not been in your favor, that's out of your hands, and you just need to use the ability, which is fair enough. So to give you a very, very, very quick demonstration, you Avengers, you run in, you're spamming your Hammer of the Righteousness. If you've taken if you're about to take a big attack, you use Shield of the Righteousness. There, I just got a free Avenger Shield, so maybe I've lost some health. Hypothetically, then maybe I'm going to use a Light the Protector to get some of that health back. And essentially, you're maintaining uptime of Consecration. I actually don't need to because of the talent, which I'll show you in a bit. But you maintain uptime of your Consecration, you use your Judgment on cooldown so you can proc your free shields, you use your Avenger's Shield so you get uptime of your Avenger's Valor in case you need it. And then you always spam Hammer of the Righteous so that you can generate your free Avenger shields. There's a decent bit of synergy. It's basically you want to fill every single GCD with something. You will of course notice, by the way, there's no Holy Power. That's dead, gone, not an element anymore. Let's go through all the abilities. So we've got Ardent Defender, 2-minute cooldown, reduces damage taken by 20% for 8 seconds. When it's active, the next attack that would otherwise kill you will instead cause you to be healed for 12% of your maximum health. We then have Divine Shield, which is exactly the same. We've got Avenger Shield, which I've already covered. Divine Steed is your movement ability. This is pretty badass. You click on this, 1-minute cooldown, you summon a horse, which allows you to run at 100% additional run speed for 4 seconds. I think it's really cool. Blessing of Freedom, you place a blessing on a friendly target, giving them immunity to movement impairing effects for 15 seconds. So there you go, it's pretty cool. Guardian of Ancient Kings, 5-minute cooldown, you become empowered by the Spirit of Ancient Kings, reducing all damage taken by 50%. A truly tremendous cooldown, and one that looks extremely cool. As you can see, it lasts for 8 seconds, it turns you into this dude, so you actually turn into your Guardian of Ancient Kings rather than it being a thing that you summon to fight for you. I think it looks extremely badass, so that is very much a point in their favor as far as I'm concerned. We've got Bop, which is pretty much the same. You're immune for 10 seconds, but you can't do anything, and you get Forbearance. We've got Guiding Light. This takes you back to your Class Order Hall. Blessing of Sacrifice. This means that 30% of the damage taken by the target of your Blessing of Sacrifice for the next 12 seconds, that damage is transferred to you, but that would stop if that damage would cause you to fall below 20% health. Hammer of Justice, 1-minute cooldown, 6 seconds stun. Consecration, which we've already covered. Or have we? It's 20,000 damage over 9 seconds. Pretty darn simple. As always, Paladin's very good at the AoE tanking, which of course is something that's backed up by Hammer of the Righteous, which is both a single target and AoE sort of filler melee ability. Hand of Reckoning, this taunts a target within 30 yards, 8-second cooldown. Judgment, which I've already covered. Shield of Righteousness, which I've already covered. Lay on Hands, which gives you full health on a 10-minute cooldown, of course causes Forbearance. We've got Light of the Protector, another instant heal, which I've already covered. And then Rebuke, which will interrupt spellcasting and prevent any spell on that school from being cast for 4 seconds. Then, of course, Redemption, which will resurrect somebody from the dead. Let's have a look at the baseline passive. So, Redoubt, I've already covered it, but your Judgment crits cause you to gain a charge of Shield of the Righteous. Then there's your Mastery, Divine Bulwark, increases damage reduction of your Shield of the Righteous by 15%, and also increases your chance to block melee attacks by 30%. It also increases attack power by 30%. And then, of course, we've got Heart of the Crusader, which means that your mounted speed is increased by 20%, but it does not stack with other movement speed increasing effects. And finally, Grand Crusader, whenever you avoid a melee attack or use Hammer of the Righteous, you have a 15% chance of refreshing the cooldown of your Avenger Shield. So let's have a look at the talents, and first of all, I totally derped out. I had Consecrated Hammer up there. Now that causes your Hammer of the Righteous to always gain the damage bonus of Consecration, which I did refer to, and no longer have a cooldown, which I didn't refer to. A little bit silly of me. By default, it's got a 3-second recharge and 2 charges. But in effect, it doesn't really touch the gameplay that much. So you run in, you do your Avenger Shield, your Judgment, you throw in your Consecration, and what you generally find, though, is that you're not really, that GCD limited by this, because it does have a decently fast recharge, and you do have procs of other things going on. So there you go. Quick little joke by me, but anyway, that's Consecrated Hammer. We then have Day of Reckoning. This causes your Hand of Reckoning, which is your taunt, to have 3 charges, but additionally, targets affected by it deal 10% less physical damage to you. So as you can see, I've got 3 charges of it, and the targets that are affected by that are going to be doing less damage to me. Yeah, it's kind of cool, but I'd rather, I don't know, it doesn't particularly interest me that much. That said, I don't tank a lot, so what do I know? We've got First Avenger. This increases the damage of Avenger's Shield by 100%, and its chance to be, for its cooldown to be reset by abilities and talents by 100%, but it only hits 1 target. This is basically the single target version, and if you look at Grand Crusader, it's 30% chance of refreshing the cooldown of Avenger's Shield when you have this talent on. So you're going to be getting quite a few more procs of your Avenger Shield, which does mean you're going to be using more Avenger's Valors, which is a very, very good thing indeed in terms of your defensive capabilities. That this essentially, if you're going to be fighting a boss fight that is either single target or only has a very limited amount of trash going in, this is probably what you're going to want to be taking for your sort of first talent row. Let's move on to the second one. Holy Shield increases your block chance by 10%, and allows you to block spells. It's kind of big. Additionally, when you block, you deal holy damage to your attacker, so that's a passive thing, can't go wrong with it, it's always going to help you. We move on to Guardian's Light. This increases the healing from Light the Protector by 20%, so it is now going to be healing you for, it says 42% of your missing health. Now that means that this is 20% of its base amount, not an additional 20%, because if I go away from that, you can see this is 35%. And then if I, click on this, it's 42. So it's not as powerful as, if you misinterpret the text there, you'll think it's more powerful than it actually is. We also have Last Defender. Each enemy within 8 yards reduces the damage you take by 3%, but it has diminishing returns, so it's not going to be crazy. Now we also have Fist of Justice. Your Judgment reduces the remaining cooldown on Hammer of Justice by 10 seconds. We've then got Repentance. This is a 15-second cooldown. You force the enemy target into meditation, incapacitating them, and dealing up to a maximum of 25% of their health and damage over 1 minute. And this is usable against demons, dragonkin, giants, humanoids, and undead. I'll show you what the spell effect for that is now. That's an invalid target because it's mechanical. So the good news is that being in the Veil, I can just use it on a Mogu to show you what it's like. So there you go. And that's pretty much him out for the count, and he will be taking some damage as time goes on. Anyway, let's move on to Binding Light. This is a 2-minute cooldown, emits dazzling light in all directions, blinding enemies within 10 yards, dealing 22,000 damage and causing them to be disoriented. Holy damage will not break the effect, so let's just go and use it on this guy. As you can see, it does some damage, and he wanders around the place. We move on to Blessing of Spell Warding. This is a 3-minute cooldown. You put a blessing on a party or raid member, protecting them from all magical attacks for 10 seconds. Can't be used on a target with Forbearance, and it does cause Forbearance, and you can see that it replaces Blessing of Protection. However, you are able to still attack things when Blessing of Spell Warding is on. So let's just put that on myself. Hopefully I can use that on myself. Yep, there we go. So I'm immune to magical attacks, but I can still attack stuff. I can still fight. So that's actually really good. We then have Blessing of Salvation. This temporarily removes all threat from a target and causes all additional threat generated by them to be transferred to the Paladin who casts it. Lasts for 10 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown, so maybe that's kind of like a handy oh shit button if somebody manages to pull aggro or some sort of whoopsie happens. We've got Retribution Aura. You deal 275 holy damage to any enemy whose melee attack strikes a non-tank ally within 60 yards. That's quite handy. We're going to have to see what that's like in terms of threat generation when it comes to, some real-world testing, but that could be quite useful. Next up, Bastion of Light. Super simple cooldown. Instantly gives you 3 charges of Shield of the Righteous, which is, of course, your main, your active mitigation. So if you have to use 3 of these in a row, right, because you've got a mental period of damage coming up, well, that's fine. You can just click on this and get them all back. It doesn't seem to have a spell effect at the minute. Crusader's Judgment. Whenever you cast Judgment, you have a 30% chance of refreshing the cooldown of Avenger Shield. That is a default 15, but First Avenger is indeed going to be doubling that. So this means that your Judgment has a chance of resetting your Avenger Shield via that. It also means that via Rebuke, it's got a Redoubt even, it's got a chance of resetting your Shield of the Righteous. So basically, it's your nice, kind, happy RNG button which can give you good things. And that is 2 independent 30% chances. So overall, there's a good chance that something's going to happen that's good whenever you use Judgment. We move on to Blessed Hammer. This is pretty cool. You throw a hammer that spirals outward, doing 5,500 damage to enemies that it hits and causing them to deal 15% less damage to the Paladin on their next auto attack. And this does replace your Hammer of the Righteous, so it's pretty much your basic ability. What you can do is go for Consecrated Hammer and then Blessed Hammer, and you can do some rather funny shenanigans, but I do have to wait for Bastion of Light to come off cooldown. So it's finally off cooldown, and let's just spam a whole bunch of these. And look at the, I don't want to say hilarity, but it's kind of amusing. You can get a whole bunch of these spinning around you and hitting enemies. Now, as much as this is a cool novelty, I actually think it feels rubbish as your main ability because, other than this, your only melee abilities are actually, Shield of the Righteous, because the 2 of these are ranged, so it makes you this kind of weird faux melee caster sort of thing, which I don't really like that much. So I'm not the biggest fan of Blessed Hammer, if I'm completely honest. Moving on to Aegis of the Light. You channel an Aegis of the Light, which protects you and all allies standing within 10 yards behind you for 6 seconds, reflecting all damage taken by 20%. I'll use that in a bit, though, because it does have a 5-minute cooldown. Judgment of the Light. Your Judgment also applies Judgment of the Light to the target, causing the next 40 successful attacks against that target to heal the attacker for 1,100. It can only occur once every few seconds on each target. Basically, if you're in a raid environment, this means everyone who's whacking in the boss is going to get a nice little heal every once in a while. But if you're out soloing in the world, do you really think you're going to be able to do 40 successful attacks within a, within a 6-second period? No. So this is one for group content, definitely. And then we have Consecrated Ground. Up to 6 allies standing within your consecration receive 450 healing every second, and enemies in your consecration have a 50% reduced movement speed. I've got to assume it'll be a little bit higher than that because, 500 healing roughly isn't really that much. Let's just use the Aegis of the Light, which is now bound on my 9 key, which looks like this. Very, very cool looking, and it is a channeled ability. Also looks a little bit placeholdery at the minute because it's not particularly clear where the effect behind you is that sort of included with that damage reduction. It does say damage is reduced by 20% for 6 seconds for everyone behind you. So, let's just take a Miss Pandaria example. It's Megara, it's on like her 5th rampage or 6th rampage or something like that. Loads of damage is coming in. You can use Aegis of the Light and you'll be taking a lot less damage, which is pretty good. So let's look at Righteous Protector. Each time you use Shield of the Righteous, your remaining cooldown on Light of the Protector is reduced by 3 seconds. Light of the Protector is, of course, your heal. So, as an example, if I use that, then I use this, you can see... Oh, I need to get in melee range of somebody. If you look at the cooldown, you can see that it is indeed decreasing as I use my charges of Shield of the Righteous. So while that is a synergy, it's not that interesting. A Knight Templar reduces the cooldown of your Divine Steed by 50% and reduces all damage taken while mounted on your Divine Steed by 20%. Makes this a little bit more defensive. So if we use this now, it's got a 30-second cooldown. I mean, pretty cool. And also, you can attack when you're on that thing. So, I mean, technically, this is a defensive cooldown, right? Yeah, it is useful for movement, but if you're standing still, that's still another 20% damage reduction every 30 seconds, which is definitely quite potent. And then we've got Final Stand. Reduces the cooldown of your Divine Shield by 50%, and when you use Divine Shield, you taunt all targets within 15 yards for 8 seconds. So, if stuff is really going bad for you and your raid, you can click Final Stand, and you can make it go good for your raid, but, not really for that long. So if I go near this guy, you can see he just got taunted, and I can attack him, albeit at reduced damage because it is Divine Shield. So that is a look at the main mechanics of this spec, pretty much. You use your abilities on cooldown, your Judgment procs, well, depending on talents, can proc both of these for free. Your Hammer of the Righteousness is a hybrid ability. It does AoE and it does single target and can give you charges of Avenger Shield. Avenger Shield will buff up your Shield of the Righteousness and I keep on saying Righteousness, and Light of the Protector. There's a good bit of synergy there. Now, we do also move on to Truth Guard, which is our artifact weapon. So it stores 10% of all damage taken in, and occasionally it releases its energy to deal all stored damage to all enemies within 8 yards, and granting you an absorb for that amount. Basically, it explodes, hurts everyone, and gives you an absorb. Now, if we look at its active ability, we've got Eye of Tyr. This releases a blinding flash from Truth Guard, causing 16,500 holy damage to all enemies within 8 yards, and reducing all damage they deal to you by 25%. I should probably go near some enemies so that I can actually use this. Though it probably will just, like, one-shot them or something because they are old mobs. But I remember it looking pretty cool unless they've, like, done something with the effect. So if I sit here, I use that. Yeah, pretty cool big pulse out. Causes them to do less damage to you. So overall, it's a bit of a win-win. And that is on a 1-minute cooldown. So then let's look at the major traits. We've got Tyr's Enforcer. The Knowledge of the Watchers causes Truth Guard to deal damage to all enemies within a number of yards of each target hit by your Avenger Shield. So if your Avenger Shield hits 3 targets, then let's just hypothetically say this is within a 8-yard range. It will do an amount of damage to every target within an 8-yard range of every mob that is hit by your Avenger Shield. Basically, this means that Avenger Shield, if you're pulling a really big clustered pack of mobs, it will pull all of them instead of just doing direct damage to 3 of them. and the rest are running to you because of that. So basically more threat generation on an AoE pool. We've got Light of the Titans. Hammer of Righteousness empowers your next Light of the Protector, causing it to heal for an additional amount. It says amount over until cancelled, so that could be an additional amount of healing over time until cancelled, or just an additional amount of healing until the buff is cancelled. A little bit funny wording there, but it is alpha. And then we've got Bulwark of Order. It says Avengers shields you for the amount of damage that is dealt. What it should say is Avengers shield, shields you for the amount of damage that it actually does. And that is pretty much the gameplay of the Protection Paladin. What do I think about it? Well, I found my testing of it to be relatively enjoyable, if I'm honest. I've seen some people say that it looks less fun. I did not play enough of this spec in Warlords of Draenor to give you my thoughts on that. You know, I think you've got a solid toolkit in terms of your defensive capabilities, because this is, you know, it's going to be that's going to be reducing all damage, not just physical. You've got very, very good AoE capability. You've got a little bit of a heal there with Light of the Protector, and of course, Lay on Hands if you really are having a bit of an oh shit moment. And you've got some pretty cool talents. Overall, you know, I think it's a pretty cool spec. We're just going to have to see how it evolves over the alpha. I know that since this has been available on the alpha, and I know a few other YouTubers have done testing, they've actually changed a number of the mechanics since then. And actually, the literature, the tooltip of Judgment was different. It used to refer to Crusader Strike and a few other things. So it seems like this is a more complete version of Prot, but it does seem like this will be going through some more evolution as the alpha progresses. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think of the spec down in the description or the comments, and I will see you next time.